What's going on? This is Dylan with Dylan Talks Tone, and today we are going to start a series of videos, kind of like those pickup comparison ones, but we're going to talk about guitar setup, and we're going to take it from a bunch of different angles to hopefully cover all of the bases. But today we're going to just talk about the fundamentals of guitar setup and why it is so important to your guitar tone. I personally believe that the guitar setup is the number one key to you sounding good before any pickups, before anything. You don't need a whole ton of tools. I use this very basic and small toolkit by Cruise Tools. This is a whole toolkit. It's got everything you need in it in this one bag, okay? We'll leave a link to it in the description below. It's not that expensive, and it's actually, in my opinion, cheaper and more convenient than having, like a bunch of tools from Harbor Freight or the hardware store or something. We also have a Korg tuner. I think it's really good to have a Korg tuner. I like Korg because it has a strobe simulator in it, and it gets really, really accurate for setting up guitar stuff. If you have just a regular clip-on snark or something, it won't be accurate enough to do a good setup. I'll leave a link to one of these in the description of the video below. It is not expensive either. And then the other thing, I don't have one of those fancy guitar mats. We'll leave a link to one that I really like in the description below. But the thing about it is I feel like when they get dirty and stuff, and then you gotta keep them clean, where an old towel you can just chuck in the laundry and it's all clean for the next project. And then the other thing is a good neck cradle. I like the Hercules neck cradle because it folds up flat. You can stick it in the bottom of your gear bag. And having a cradle is super handy to keep your guitar safe and keep it nice and flat for when we're working on it. Now that we have our tools lined out, that's the basic stuff. Like I said, we'll leave a link to all that stuff in the description below. Probably on Amazon, you can go and buy that. When you use those Amazon links, it doesn't cost you anymore, but it does help the channel out just a little bit, so I do appreciate it. So, fundamentals of guitar setup. What we're trying to do is we're trying to make it to where when we play every note, it is as intended. It is clean. Every time we have a buzz or a rattle or something is out of tune, that kills our tone. So if we were to play a chord, see, every note is clean. Did you hear that little buzz the first time I hit it? Basically, when we fret a note, some of it has to do with our technique, right? But the ease with which we can fret a note and have a clean note anywhere on the neck is a key to our tone, because if we have a rattle, then what we're doing is we're introducing basically a vibration and a dampening of the string vibration that is basically killing the note sooner. It's going to kill sustain, and it's also going to sound out of tune. Now, there's something I think a lot of people don't realize about guitar setup and being in tune. So let's do this. All right, so I'm a little bit out of tune. It might not sound like I'm terribly out of tune. Ooh, that is flat. You might kind of get away with playing that. However, here's what's happening. Instead of having harmonics that play well with each other, when we have these harmonics, when we have these harmonics playing well together, you notice how well that rings out? Now watch this. Hear them fight each other. Woo, 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 woo. It gives you that weird warbly thing. So what's happening is those two vibrations are fighting against each other, and they will in effect die sooner. So if you are playing a chord and you're out of tune, then especially on an acoustic guitar, all those vibrations will be working against one another, and everything will die more quickly. Like, you won't have the sustain that you want. The note will die quicker. Of course, it'll just sound terrible. But there's a lot of ways that your guitar setup affects that, okay? So I'm gonna basically just run through the steps of setting up a guitar, and we're gonna show you how each one of those steps affects the harmonics of the guitar so that they don't fight against one another, and so that we don't have any kind of like rattling or any other sort of mechanical, you know, that kind of stuff that's killing tone. Now that the guitar is in tune, we've got to talk about the mechanics of how the guitar stays set up and how everything works. All modern guitars have a truss rod that goes through the neck from the end over here down to somewhere right about here. And in this guitar, it's actually anchored on this end and it's loose on this end, and there's a little nut in there. On most electric guitars, it's fixed on this end and it's got a little nut down here on this end. What that does is the strings, because they're under tension, okay, so probably about 80 to 100 pounds of tension, are pulling this way. They're wanting to bend the guitar this direction. So the truss rod is counteracting that force by being inside the neck and basically pushing up on the neck to counteract the tension of the strings. The balance between those two directions, the truss rod going like this and the strings going like this, and everything being balanced, gives us our playing surface. And so if we don't have the guitar in tune, then we won't be able to set anything, because this is the baseline. When we talk about setting a truss rod, I personally refer to this as establishing our playing surface. And so then the idea would be to use that wrench to set the tension on that rod to where it's a balance between the strings pulling this way and the truss rod going the other way. The net result would be that we would have a neck that is almost straight, but not quite. We don't want the neck to be totally straight. We want it to have a little bit of a dish. It's called relief, because when the string vibrates, it vibrates basically like this, and so you got to give it a little bit of room to move. So you want a little bit of relief in there. So let's say like a business card width, right here in the middle of the neck. So if you hold the string down here and you hold the string down at the first fret, then about halfway in between, then you're going to see about a business card's width or so. And you'll just go eighth turn this way or an eighth turn this way. When you tighten it, the middle comes up. When you loosen it, the middle goes down. And you just want to make sure that you have about a business card thickness right there. That will determine everything else. If that is not correct, then none of the rest of the setup will be correct. The next thing we probably would want to check is our nut height. When we're talking about how this affects tone and how it affects the sound of the guitar, if our nut is too high, and well, first of all, if our nut's too low, you're going to get like buzzes, right? Now, I'm making it do that, but you'll get that kind of sound. Down here in your cowboy chords, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If the nut is too high, you'll have to pull down so hard and so far with each of the strings, and that I can't simulate here, but you'll have to pull down so far and so hard that it will pull the chord out of tune, and so your basic first position chords will be out of tune. So what we want to do is use a feeler gauge that comes in our cool toolkit here, and we want to put it underneath our first fret. And for every guitar is a little bit different, but typically I like to have about 20 thousandths to 25 thousandths right here underneath the first fret, considering everything else is more or less set up properly. Again, in other videos we'll get specifically into each of these steps, but this is just kind of an overview. Then the thing I like to do is string height or action. Now on an electric guitar it's real simple because we do up and down individually on each saddle. On an acoustic guitar it's more difficult because all we have is this one saddle that goes all the way across here. On an acoustic guitar, a lot of people want to try to use the truss rod to adjust the action, but that is incorrect. We want that truss rod to stay at that one business card right there, okay? And then we want to adjust our string height with the actual height of this saddle right here. Literally what you would do is take the saddle out and you would very carefully sand it on a piece of sandpaper so that the bottom remains totally flat, so that it will make good contact when it goes back in. And you will literally sand this down and put it back in until the strings are at the desired height. Some people say the 12th fret, some people say the 17th fret. On an acoustic guitar, I would definitely go the 12th fret. So once we've set the string height, then we need to set intonation. On an acoustic guitar, obviously that has a lot to do with just the compensation of the saddle itself. On this guitar, it's set. On an electric guitar, we would have saddles that are individually adjustable that would go back and forth. Now what we're trying to do with intonation, and a lot of people get super confused with intonation, but basically, and this is very important to guitar tone because this means whether you're in tune or not, and this also means that you won't have these harmonics that are trying to kill each other, killing your sustain and make your guitar sound terrible. When everything is intonated correctly, your notes will ring out longer, you'll sound in tune, it will be a completely different and better playing guitar if you take this time. Now one thing I will mention to you, do not do this adjustment if you have not gone through the individual steps to get to this point, because all of those other measurements are the basis for the intonation adjustment. What is intonation? It is the length of the string. So every guitar has a scale length. This particular guitar is 25.5 inches, which means at the 12th fret we have 12 3/4 inches. That means that from the nut to the 12th fret, the crown of the 12th fret is 12 3/4 inches. That also means that from the 12th fret to the saddle is 12 3/4 inches. 12th fret is exactly in the middle. Why do we need to set intonation? Because we need to set that length on the high E string to exactly that. Why do you have to set these differently? Why can't you just set them all on a straight line? Because as the string gets physically thicker, so we have 10 thousandths of an inch on an electric, so this would be 13 thousandths of an inch, and we have 56 thousandths of an inch over here. 10 to 56, that's what those numbers mean when you say, I want 10s on my guitar, I want 11s on my guitar, I want 12s on my guitar. It's because we're talking about the thousandths of an inch of thickness of the high E string. So this guitar is 13 to 56. If our string height, or if our string length and our scale length is 25.5 inches, and it's set perfectly at 25.5 inches right here for our high E, then on our low E, it's not going to be exactly the same, because the thickness of the string means that we have to move it back so that it's exactly the same length from here to here. The thickness of the string changes just a little bit, and that's why that tilts back just a little bit. And that's why when you look at an electric guitar, you'll see the low E string is just a little bit further back. And you'll also notice that it changes when you go from the unwound strings to the wound strings. It shifts just a little bit because the thickness of the string changes so drastically when you go from an unwound string to a wound string. So the long and the short of it is, you're just trying to set the length of the string to be exactly 12.75 inches from here to here, and from here to here, and from here to here, and from here to here, down to the thousandth of an inch. That's all intonation really is. So in some upcoming videos, what we're going to do is we're going to break down each one of these processes for an acoustic guitar and for an electric guitar. But here's the thing. If the guitar is totally in tune, no matter where you are on the neck, if you don't have any buzzes, you're going to be worlds ahead of the next guy who doesn't spend any time setting up his guitar. My name is Dylan. This is Dylan Talks Tone. If you have any questions about guitar tone, guitar tech, all this stuff, you let me know in the comments. If you have, this brings up any questions. I know this was just a quick overview of guitar setup. And we're going to get, like I said, more in depth, one step at a time. If you have any questions specifically to this, put it into the comments on this video. Also, make sure that you are subscribed and that you hit the little bell notification, because I actually ordered, those of you that have been helping us out on Patreon, just so you know what I'm using your money for, I've ordered a new set of these and a tuner and a new one of these to give away at the end of the month, at the end of January. So we'll pick a random winner and give that away at the end of the month. So make sure you stay subscribed, make sure you stay tuned, because this is going to be a cool thing. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you next time.